Hello, this is Dr. Sana Hashmi, and this week in my Prince Eye on China column, I dug into the Chinese discourse on a very controversial issue that actually sent shockwaves to the DC, Washington DC, as well as New Delhi strategic and diplomatic community. And the issue was the arrest of Ashley J Tellis, who is a former State Department employee and now a scholar, very influential scholar on India US relations, who worked with Carnegie Endowment Center. So the arrest of Ashley J Tellis, who has long seen as the intellectual face of India-US strategic cooperation, has actually sent ripples through both Washington and New Delhi. It became a hot topic, especially on X, on the internet, Indian internet, as well as a lot of scholars, a lot of officials in the US was discussing, as in it was something that was unimaginable, specifically for someone like Tellis. So for years, Tellis was the man shaping how the two democracies work together, especially in balancing China's growing influence. So he actually saw India as an effective counterbalance to China. But now he's facing charges of holding, retaining unlawful retention of classified documents, as well as maintaining contacts, going out for dinners with Chinese officials. So the charges and the nature of his relationship equation with the Chinese officials have not really been announced. They are particularly unknown, like what was the kind of linkages and relationship he shared with the Chinese official. And apart from discussing international relations, what were the interaction and conversations between him and the Chinese officials? But then, almost overnight, a trusted bridge builder has now become a figure of suspicion. Tellis arrest isn't just about one individual. For China, this is a topic that's also being discussed on the Chinese internet. On the Chinese internet, in the strategic community, it is actually being seen as a reflection of something much deeper, the changing dynamics between Washington, New Delhi, as well as Beijing. So, on Chinese social media, the reaction has been swift and layered. Many Chinese commentators have called the episode as a proof that trust between US and New Delhi was always fragile, and it is now becoming more and more fraught and fragile. And some other Chinese observers, commentators, they argue that that marks the end of what they describe as America's strategic altruism towards India. The idea that Washington once saw India as a partner for the greater strategic good, not merely for immediate gain, is something that is gaining ground in DC. This is all Chinese perspective. This is something that I just saw on the Chinese internet. And one particularly striking comment from a Chinese analyst actually described Tellis fall as a carefully orchestrated political calculation. So they're actually seeing it as a witch hunt rather than something that has actually happened or that is actually true. And the irony wasn't actually lost on them. The man who championed India US cooperation against China is now accused of being linked to China himself. And then Chinese commentators have also been quick to use metaphors. Tell us, they say, that has now become a gadget for the US, useful when tensions with China need to be highlighted but discarded when the politics shift. And to them, his downfall actually symbolizes the shifting power balance in Beijing, Washington, New Delhi triangle. And one commentator also called the entire episode as America's self-inflicted injury, while another commentator more poetically wrote that he built bridges between India and the US, but now a pile of documents, a trash bag, and a dinner have brought it all crashing down. So that line actually captures how deeply symbolic this case has become in Chinese commentary, and I think much more than in within the Indian commentary, Indian discourse. And then there was this widely circulated article by a doctoral student at Tsinghua University, Mao Kechi, who described Tellis as the soul of India-US relations. And in his widely circulated article, he argued that the arrest reveals something uncomfortable about Washington, and that is the trust is not unconditional, transactional, and rooted more in short-term interest rather than long-term loyalty. So he also further said that India has shifted from being a pawn to contain China to a lifeline to sustain America's position. And in that irony, the strategist caught in the machinery he once helped design the India US relations, but now he's caught in between the distraught India US relations. And Chinese observers are seeing this as both caution and vindication. And across Chinese commentary, one theme that stands out is the decline of strategic altruism towards India. The sense that America's partnership, including with India, are now guided by immediate political needs and not shared strategic vision or long term interest and long term strategy. And Tellis' case in this light becomes a collateral damage, part of a system where loyalty and expertise can be sidelined when convenient. So this is very different from how we are seeing in India, and that was very interesting to look at how the Chinese observers and commentators are actually looking at this. So this was very striking for me, at least. And in fact, some even compare it with China's own long-term interest in scholarship and strategic community. So while this is not directly related, but last week there was this World Conference on Chinese Studies in Shanghai, and China was in this discourse was portrayed as a steadily building as a country that is steadily building its intellectual infrastructure, and that was a contrast, according to a number of Chinese commentators, to Washington's volatility, and where even seasoned thinkers like Tellis can fall victim to shifting priorities. So, across Chinese commentaries, one theme that actually gained a lot of attention with respect to Tellis' arrest is that this is actually not about an individual, this is about the broader India US relationship. Then, apart from this, I feel that this is something that they are actually seeing in a very different light, and this is very different, and there's hardly any uh, discourse, there's hardly any commentary on how there were linkages between Tellis and the Chinese officials, and what he was actually doing with the Chinese officials, and what were the documents that actually, if at all, shared with them. So I think this is something that has been missing from the Chinese discourse, and I feel that there's a lot of focus on one individual, and and I don't think that that's the correct assessment of this episode, that how Tellis is being framed, primarily because India US relationship are not on the right track. So I feel there's a overemphasis on his capability, and specifically in today's time. So I feel this is just a narrative of convenience, specifically for the Chinese, specifically for this particular episode, that how there is no freedom of speech left in the United States, how there's hardly, and how scholars who actually educated for good relationship with countries such as India and China are now being marginalized. So this is something that I actually found flawed, and this is something that is very very different from how in India people are seeing Tellis arrest. And in fact, if we look at Tellis' recent publications in Foreign Affairs, delusions about India's great power, America's bad bet on India, these are something now for a lot of Indians are making sense now why he wrote such articles. The truth is still not out yet. This is still under investigation, so we have to wait and see where this goes. But to conclude, I would say the discourse in China about Tellis' arrest, about this entire episode, is focusing on India US relationship rather than focusing on an individual and focusing on the case. So I do believe this is entirely the narrative, the discourse that is being convenient, that is used to focus on the issue that the US India relationship are not really on the right track. So I feel that we have to take this discourse with a pinch of salt, but it's always interesting to see what they are talking about and how they are actually looking at India US relationship. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.